South Africa House on Trafalgar Square is one of our country's most storied diplomatic addresses. It opened in 1933. It's hosted anti-apartheid vigils by the hundred. And it's where Nelson Mandela addressed a huge crowd in 2001. I've stood on that same pavement myself more than once during our 3 years in the UK, most notably with one of the get-togethers for a Zuma Must Go demonstration, where I even grabbed one, or was handed one of the loud-hailers to make a little speech, probably the first and last that I ever will do that. Anyway, South Africa House is very warm in many hearts of thoughtful patriots of this country, but now it's shut its doors. The DA says it's neglect. Dirco says it's a planned upgrade. Later in the show, I'll bring you my conversation with the man who's asking the awkward questions. That's the DA's Ryan Smith. And it turns out that it's a much bigger story than just a diplomatic or a high commission that's being temporarily closed down and fixed up at an enormous cost. Some put it at 70 million rand. It's more about who our nation sends abroad to represent us. It's been a dumping ground for so long that the ANC appears to have forgotten the real purpose of having ambassadors and high commissioners internationally, and the job that they're supposed to do isn't one to go there and drink tea and show up in the office when they feel like it. And taxpayers should now be demanding much more bang for our buck. Welcome to the BizNews Edge. I'm Alec Hogg. You're going to want to see that South Africa House story. But first, 3 other stories that landed on my desk this morning that you need to know about. 1 close to home, and 2 from the other side of the world that tell you an enormous amount of where money is flowing right now. Well, let's start with the governance story, cutting to the heart of South African finance. The Public Investment Corporation, custodian of over 3 trillion rand in public servants' pensions, that's roughly a tenth of all of the shares listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, has suspended its chief executive, Patrick Dlamini, pending a whistleblower investigation. Well, that you know, we have reported on that before. What you might not know is that the Financial Services Conduct Authority, the very powerful body whose intervention was the reason why, well, it tipped the most famous financial fugitive in South Africa, Marcus Jooste, over the edge. And the day after the FSCA issued its report, exposing him as just a common criminal, a common crook, Jooste took his life. Well, now it's got involved, and it's opened a formal probe at the Public Investment Corporation, saying it sees serious concerns. It has serious concerns about governance, leadership stability, and transparency. And then in a second leadership shuffle, buried in the same statement, the Government Employees Pension Fund, that's the PIC's biggest client, has pulled its backing for the acting chief investment officer. Fixed income head Leon Smit is taking that seat instead. Nothing's proven yet, but when the country's single largest investor starts changing leaders under regulatory pressure, every pension holder in this country should be watching closely, especially the retired and still serving public servants. A much happier story comes to us from Europe, and a result that the market had already made up its mind on before a single number was even published this morning. ASML, the Dutch company that makes machines without which not a single advanced computer chip on the planet would be built, released its second quarter financial results this morning. The share price was already up 3% on Wall Street last night, purely in anticipation, and it added another 4% today in pre-market trade. That's the market telling you in the clearest language that it has that these numbers were a genuine beat. And so they were. Sales and margins both came in comfortably ahead of guidance. That's what the company suggests to analysts on Wall Street, where it will be delivering its numbers in the quarter ahead. This was driven by existing customers paying to upgrade and service the machines that they already had from ASML. Higher margins, stickier revenue than a straight new machine sale. In other words, always better to have retention rather than trying to have acquisition. Management has raised its full year outlook for the second time this year, and it gave a third quarter guide that clears what analysts had been expecting by a wide margin. The number that matters most, though, for the long term isn't in these 3 months at all. It's what ASML is committing to build. The company says that it is adding 30% more advanced chip making capacity for next year and is now actively planning another 30% on top of that for the year thereafter, 2028. Revenue tied to the most advanced logic chips is guided to grow by a quarter this year alone. Memory-related revenue by something closer to 3/4, 75%. Translation of all this, ASML isn't hedging its bet on this AI capital spending cycle running for years yet. It's spending its own balance sheet as if it's certain of it. No hedging, we know. That's about as strong a signal as a management team can give you. ASML is the star performer in the BizNews Ricardo US dollar portfolio. And now you know why. And now to the other side of that same coin, because if ASML is proof of where AI capital spending is going, IBM is proof of where it's coming from. Big Blue put out an unscheduled update and a letter to shareholders yesterday, and it's genuinely one of the worst days this company, once the world's most valuable, has ever had. The IBM stock didn't just fall, it crashed, down 25% in a single session. That's the biggest one-day drop in IBM's history, worse even than Black Monday in 1987. It wiped out close to $70 billion of market value in a matter of hours. What happened? Well, shareholders have been warned by the company that in the June quarter, that's the one that we've just finished, revenue barely grew, and it missed the expectations that analysts had written into their numbers. But it's the explanation that should worry every legacy technology investor. Chief Executive Arvind Krishna, who wrote the letter, told shareholders in his own words, "We faltered. Enterprise clients are ripping capital out of traditional software and consulting budgets and redirecting it straight into AI hardware, servers, storage, memory, well, before prices climb still further. On top of that, a wave of industry-wide cybersecurity anxiety has shifted client spending towards defensive measures rather than the deals that IBM's sales teams were counting on. IBM is pointing to a $10 billion 5-year bet on quantum computing as its answer for the future. Markets weren't in the mood to hear that yesterday. The bigger message here is for the whole software as a service sector. The AI boom that's minting fortunes for chip makers and companies like ASML is starting to cannibalize the budgets of the legacy giants sitting just one layer up the stack. Two sides of the same global story. But now back home to a story about an entirely different kind of neglect. Ryan Smith is the DA's spokesman on international relations, and he's been the man asking Dirco the uncomfortable questions about South Africa House. Have a listen. South Africa House on Trafalgar Square is one of the country's most storied diplomatic addresses. It opened in 1933, scene of the anti-apartheid vigils, many of them, and Mandela's own 2001 address to the crowd there, well remembered. I can recall having been there for a Zuma Must Go effort just outside on Trafalgar Square, which is one of the places that you go to when you get to London. Well, it's now shut its doors. The DA says it's neglect. Dirco says it's a planned upgrade. Ryan Smith, the DA's spokesman on international relations, joins me now. Ryan, thanks for joining us. You've been doing a lot of the running on this. I just really need to clarify something for people like me who are pretty panicked to believe that South Africa House is going to be gone and sold and somebody's going to make money out of that. It's a temporary shutdown, isn't it? It's not going to be, it's not gone. We're not going to lose that prime spot.
No, it seems to be a temporary shutdown. It's not as if the building has been lost to the South African High Commission in London. So that's certainly not the case, at least not from what we know at the moment. The problem is that there's absolutely no transparency in terms of the process for the renovation and the refurb. The only reason that Dirco came out and admitted that it was a refurbishment was because we blew the lid off the story and notified the public of the closure. Some of the contacts that we have in London had gone to the building to see if there was anything posted on the door, any sort of sign, any sort of notice on the website, and there was really nothing. So we wouldn't have gotten that information had we not alerted the public to the closure of South Africa House. But it's one of a series of many embassies and High Commission buildings and a number of foreign assets within Dirco's purview that have fallen into a terrible, terrible state over the past few decades. And it's something that we are trying to get to the bottom of. You can't grow the economy and push a very strong economic diplomacy initiative if the very symbol of investing in South Africa is a decrepit building with, paint peeling off the walls and no marketing or advertising for South Africa. So we take it very seriously.
It must have gone down rapidly because I visited South Africa House numerous times when we were in the UK for 3 years between 2016 and 2019, and it was in pretty good shape back then. Sure, the main door, the door that opens onto Trafalgar Square, for some reason was always locked, but you could walk around there. In fact, we even attended a number of events there, which were highlights of my trip. So what happened? Where did this decrepit state of the building come from?
I think much like, municipalities in South Africa, it's if you leave maintenance or you delay maintenance for long enough, it eventually kind of snowballs astronomically and exponentially into a series of very kind of quick collapses of services. And I think that's probably what we've seen in South Africa House as well. I was there for an event with the South African Chamber of Commerce about 3 or 4 years ago, and it seemed fine. But you hear mixed reports. I've got a colleague in the Western Cape Legislature who was there about a year ago, and he said to me they were sitting there for a meeting for about 2 hours, and not once were they offered any tea or coffee or allowed to go to the bathroom, which points to the fact that maybe there was no water in the building, which I think corroborates reports that we've received from other people who've been in the building. There've been some high-profile figures who've come out and said, yes, this is absolutely true. The building has very quickly degraded over the past couple of years. And, the point that I made to Dirco is I said, they kind of said that the reports were over-exaggerated about the closure of the embassy. But the reality is that why has it reached the stage where the building has to be closed for half a year, if not longer, for simple maintenance when that could have just been done routinely over the past decade or two to keep the building in good nick? And I think any South African who's been to Trafalgar Square, if you compare our High Commission to the Canadian High Commission, which is nearby, to the Indian High Commission, which is also quite close, those are beautiful buildings. They stand out. They really draw the eye. They've got a number of sort of marketing campaigns for tourism, for industry, for products on the side. The flag is very clean and it's flown very proudly. The same cannot be said for the High Commission in the UK, unfortunately. So it does point to something, I think, more serious. And, what people don't, I think what a lot of the public don't realize is that Dirco's financial performance as a department actually regressed in 2024-25 when the Auditor General released the budgetary review and recommendations report. And in that report, they say quite clearly that it is as a direct result of the mismanagement of Dirco's foreign assets, which have been rendered, and I quote exactly from that report, have been rendered uninhabitable. So even the AG in South Africa has seen that there's a systemic issue with the maintenance of properties. And Dirco and Minister Lamola seem to just kind of brush it off. There's no willingness to actually engage with politicians. There's no transparency. I submitted a question to the department asking for the lease agreements for all of the properties that we rent for our foreign service across all of our missions, and was told, sorry, that's too much work. We can't give them all to you. You must ask for them individually. Now, it's just you don't get anything out of the department. You're trying to find out. You're trying to do your oversight. You're trying to do what people elected you to do. And Dirco seems to have this very eye-rolling, dismissive attitude towards anyone asking any questions. So it's difficult to get to the bottom of. But I think, like a lot of South Africans have said, if you look at how municipalities have been unmaintained for so long in South Africa, it wouldn't come as a surprise to think that the same is happening in our foreign missions abroad.
This is your remit. This is the area you look at. How many of those who populate our embassies around the world, and remember, it's a very expensive exercise. We have a weak currency. How many of those are cadres that have been deployed for lovely retirements, and how many of those are professionals?
Well, that's exactly a question that I've just submitted recently to the department, because what normally happens in a country is you'll have a cap as to the number of political appointments you can place into your foreign service. And what normally is done is very strategic, important countries like Washington, D.C., like London, like Paris, for example, potentially Beijing in China, those are reserved for political relationships where you would send a former Minister of Foreign Affairs or a former sort of high-ranking politician who's left the political sphere, and those political appointments are important. You sometimes need a political understanding of a country when you post it as an ambassador, as opposed to someone who's a career diplomat. But the problem is, I think that South Africa, we don't know yet whether there is a cap on the number of political appointees. And we don't actually have enough career diplomats in the foreign service in terms of people who know the country that they've been posted to very well, understand the trade opportunities that can be exploited for South Africa, and can actually go about staffing the mission adequately, saying we need a trade advisor who's competent in agricultural goods, for example, or we need a specialist who is in defense, so that those relationships can really be leveraged to the best possible ability for the benefits of South Africa. That's really what those embassies and foreign missions should be. But it has unfortunately just become, I think, overpopulated with political appointments. We always say that the ANC sweeps many of their corruption scandals under the diplomatic rug. So if you're facing a lot of kind of heat and controversy back home, you get sent abroad, and that's most recently been I think exemplified by Ayanda Dlodlo, who's now the ambassador to France. And these people don't serve us. It's not well thought out. It's kept very close to the president's chest in terms of those appointments. And we certainly think that it should be far more transparent and should be there should be a cap as to the number of political appointments made, and the rest should be sole career diplomats who actually understand the job and can do it properly.
Just let's dwell a little in France, because it is quite a controversial place if you happen to be a South African ambassador there. The most recent one, did the Government of National Unity have nothing to do with it? And then secondly, have you got any more insight into what happened to the previous ambassador who committed suicide, apparently?
Yeah, I mean, the late Nathi Mthethwa's death, I think, is still the subject of several investigations. So those are ongoing to my knowledge. I'm not sure if there's been any conclusion. It was a very tragic incident. But of course, Nathi's appointment comes from the previous administration. So that was under an ANC majority. Ayanda Dlodlo, there was no consultation to my knowledge as to her appointment as an ambassador. I think it was purely an ANC move. But there was actually a very good article, I think, on News 24 that was saying, if you pierce the veil on the ANC's attempt to speak about renewal, when you look at these appointments, it just shows that nothing has changed. Um, People are recycled somewhere, and the minute someone is fired, they pop up somewhere else. Dina Pule was fired from cabinets under Jacob Zuma. She's now been made the new Minister of Social Development. She, had a position as a portfolio chairperson in Parliament. Ayanda Dlodlo was the former State Security Minister, then Public Administration Minister, who was also let go because of several scandals and corruption allegations. She's now popped up again as the ambassador to France. So the pattern that you see is that the ANC doesn't really believe in renewal and is certainly not practicing it, because they just keep recycling the same people to make sure that they've got jobs and high-paying salaries at the cost of South Africa's reputation and image in many cases abroad. There's nothing worse than getting to a foreign capital and you start seeing every other country's embassy and you start looking for South Africa's, and when you eventually find it, it's this little hole in a wall that's you would probably walk past and think it was maybe a brothel, because it's just not taken as seriously as it should be by a department that is the outward face of our government.
So there's your edge for today, and if there's a single thread running through all four stories, it's this. Institutions, public and private, South African and global, get found out the moment leadership stops paying attention to the basics. The PIC's suspended its own CEO over a whistleblower report. Dirco let an embassy in one of the world's great capital cities fall apart for want of routine maintenance. IBM's management has admitted in writing that they didn't see their own clients' spending shift. And on the other side of the same shift, ASML is thriving precisely because it did see it coming, and it is spending accordingly. To recap, the PIC, under a fresh FSCA investigation after suspending its chief executive, Patrick Dlamini, will have more on that story in the next day or so. ASML shares were up sharply again this morning after a substantial beat and raise. IBM down 25% yesterday, the worst session in its history, after a warning that AI spending is crowding out its legacy business. And South Africa House in London shut indefinitely, with the DA's Ryan Smith laying the blame squarely on decades of neglect and cadre deployment in our foreign service. That's the BizNews Edge for today. My thanks to Ryan Smith for his time, and thank you as always for spending this time with me. For more on all those stories, head to biznews.com or here on BizNews TV. I'm Alec Hogg. Until tomorrow, cheerio. In uncertain times, good information is priceless. The BizNews conference is heading back to the Drakensberg. Join me, Alec Hogg, from the 11th to the 14th of August for BNC 9, Champagne Sports Resort, where it all began and where our community gathers for honest conversations, smart investing insights, and direct access to some of South Africa's sharpest minds. Come and rub shoulders with the best we've got. 28 keynote speakers, 3 days. Seats are available now. Book your seat by clicking the link in the description. Start your day a step ahead. BizNews Insider. It delivers the business stories that matter every morning straight to your inbox. Sharp, fast, and free. Subscribe now.